The war in heaven took its toll upon the Necron dynasties, annihilating many entirely. Time has seen more still eradicated as tomb complexes have slipped into true and abiding death. Still, a vast number of dynasties remain, each with their own tomb worlds, unique heraldry, and cultural and military predispositions. Indeed, there are far more dynasties abroad amongst the stars than even humanity's darkest nightmares would envision. The Szarekhan Dynasty. If this dynasty was once known by a different name, biotransference, or the mental command of Szarekh himself, erased it from memory. Those of the Szarekhan Dynasty know only that it was from their number that the last silent king arose, and that by his word they are to be considered preeminent. But with Zarekh's command protocols gone, many of their rival dynasties are less convinced. The Szarekhan Dynasty were comparatively slow to wake. Their worlds had been scattered by galactic catastrophes, the greatest of which was the onset of Warpstorm Asmodor in M18. Many of their tomb complexes had been destroyed, whether by natural disasters or the vengeful attention of the Eldari, who sought out Szarekhan worlds with particular venom. Nor were the Eldari the only foes from ancient days. With Zarekh's command protocols severed, many dynasties awoke with a burning resentment towards the Szarekhan. Who were they to have set themselves above all? Some nobles asked. Others blamed them for every horror of the war in heaven, holding them to account for the perceived misdeeds of their absent leader. More than one rival dynasty acted violently upon such feelings, and between this hostile attention and that of the lesser races, it is a testament to the Szarekhan Dynasty's skill in strategy and martial artifice that they survived it all. Yet survive they did, beset upon all sides, but haughty in their sense of superiority. Their nobles believed with the fervor of prophecy that the Silent King would return and reward their loyalty. Many amongst the rival dynasties feared this might prove true. If the Szarekhan were undeserving, they asked, why then did the Triarch Praetorians ally themselves so readily to their cause? Often fighting in the Szarekhan defense even against other Necrons. And why did their cryptechs envy skills in the crafting of weapons, armored bodies, and potent war engines more formidable than those of any other dynasty? It was not simply that they recruited the most skilled cryptechs, not only that the revivification and repair facilities deep within the Szarekhan tombs operated with the greatest finesse and efficiency. No, this was something deeply buried in the Necrons' artificial psyches. Something that manifested in an almost supernatural fashion, so that even lesser dynasties, subsumed into the Szarekhan totality, soon exhibited these same traits. Was it some final blessing bestowed by the Silent King to ensure that his people would always endure? This, at least, was the Szarekhan Pharaoh's claim. Now that Szarekh has returned, his dynasty hold themselves vindicated, revealing ancient treasures and monstrous superweapons long hoarded against this day. The Szarekhan enclaves push rapidly outward, launching countless attacks to draw enemies away from the sites where the Silent King is raising his contra-empiric matrix. Many smaller dynasties have already flocked to ally themselves with, or else been willingly absorbed into, the Szarekhan ranks. After all, any who resist effectively declare themselves opposed to the will of the Silent King. In such an age of chaos and misrule, there are many Necron nobles who would surrender much to feel the unity and validation of a tyrant's hand upon their shoulder once again, and more who fear the consequences should they refuse. The Sautekh Dynasty. The Sautekh Dynasty has long been the most numerous and aggressively expansionist of all Necron dynasties. Indeed, many of the Necron's foes could be forgiven for their mistaken belief that the colors of the Sautekh Dynasty are, in fact, the unified military panoply of the Necron race as a whole. It is their legions, after all, that have assailed the lesser races the most often. The crown world of the Sautekh Dynasty is known as Mandragora the Golden, and it is the embodiment of the Sautekh themselves, sepulchrally grim in its macabre magnificence and fortified on a scale that makes the notion of invasion seem a dark jest. Mandragora is a center for military power, unimaginable riches, and the singular obsession of ultimate galactic conquest. This is but one world of the Sautekh Dynasty, of course. In the centuries since the first Sautekh tomb complexes awoke, this dynasty have claimed hundreds more, though Mandragora is undoubtedly their greatest. The Sautekh legions march tirelessly, the dynasty's entire focus bent upon marshalling ever more armies, raising ever more fleets, and sweeping out through the stars to conquer ever more territories in the name of their Pharaoh, Imhotep the Stormlord. It is from Imhotep himself that this relentless militaristic bent flows. Formerly a famed nemesor for those he saw as his superiors, Imhotep claimed the throne from those same nobles when they proved unable to set aside their own petty squabbles. From that day onwards, the Stormlord shaped the destiny of his awakening dynasty, focusing their every effort towards unifying the Necrons and ensuring their dominance over the upstart lesser races. The Sautekh Dynasty does not restrict its conquests to the worlds of other species. Imhotep's legions have swept over numerous dynastic territories during their relentless expansion. Those who offer ready allegiance are swiftly subsumed into the Sautekh Dynasty, often accorded substantial honor for their willingness to accept unity over personal pride. Those dynasties that resist are subjected to the full might of the Sautekh legions, albeit they are usually accorded the dynastic codes of honor. Once humbled, they are absorbed all the same, though in a far more brutal fashion than capitulation would have earned. The results of the unending Sautekh conquests are that their legions are immensely numerous and their arsenals replete with mighty war engines. When Imhotep stretches out his living metal talons, he can darken the skies with invasion craft, unleash the fire of thousands of massed war engines, and send infantry phalanxes beyond number to crush his foes. While the territory held by the Sautekh Dynasty does not yet rival that of many lesser races, still it is an immense swath of systems for a few centuries' conquest. If Imhotep's advance continues, there is no telling how vast the Sautekh Empire may one day become. The Mephrit Dynasty. The Mephrit Dynasty are infamous for their destructive excesses. In the time before the Great Sleep, they were the planetary headsmen of the Silent Kings, employing incredible star-killing weaponry to exterminate entire systems. Once, civilizations all across the galaxy knew to dread the Mephrit Dynasty. When an example needed to be made, or a redoubtable opponent shattered, it was they who executed the deed. Employing spaceborne weaponry of incalculable power, the Mephrit mercilessly slew the stars that gave enemy systems life, leaving their foes frozen in the void or annihilated in seething storms of stellar fire. Many of the other Necron dynasties found such conduct dishonorable and distasteful. Few lauded the Mephrit for their deeds, despite the fact that countless interstellar campaigns were swiftly and decisively concluded in this way. Their peers might have scorned their methods, but none would have been foolish enough to court the Mephrit Dynasty's displeasure. In the end, the Mephrit themselves were satisfied that to be feared was an even greater boon than to be accorded honor and respect. The millennia have not been kind to the Mephrit Dynasty. Though many of their tomb worlds survive intact, the dynasty's Pharaoh, Nihilakh the Eternal, was slain by pernicious Eldari infiltrators while he still slumbered. Worse still, the Mephrit have awoken to find their grand weapons of solar execution lost or destroyed by the violent caprice of an uncaring galaxy. Rule of the Mephrit Dynasty is now hotly contended for. Ambitious nobles, such as Zarathustra the Ineffable, Eknathet the Glorious, and Anubatar of the Thousand Victories, strive to outmaneuver one another, proving their supremacy through military victories and deeds of grandeur. In truth, though, the first to reclaim the ability to murder stars will surely reign supreme. It is for this reason that several contenders have now turned to the Technomandrites for aid. The Nephrekh Dynasty. The trinary stars of the Nephrekh crown world, Orient, provide an overwhelming bounty of solar energy that has benefited this dynasty greatly. In a galaxy of constant war, however, they have been forced to fight in order to keep what is theirs. When the tomb complexes deep beneath the surface of Orient stirred to wakefulness, its inhabitants emerged to find that the legions of the Altmore dynasty had laid claim to their world. These rivals had been drawn in part by the desire to enslave the imperial settlers who had long basked in Orion's solar power. However, the Altmore also sought to harness the energies of these trinary stars for their own military use. The Nephrekh Pharaon, Silphek, wasted no time in fighting back. The Great Sleep had corrupted Silphek's personality engrams and left him not just appreciative of his crown world's neighboring stars, but completely obsessed by them. He was incensed by what he saw as the desecration of his dynasty's sacred rites. The campaign for retribution that Silphek led was lightning swift and ferocious, soon driving Altmore Necrons and Imperial forces alike from the system. Since that day, the Nephrekh have basked in the light of their stars. Harnessing these energies has allowed them to amass arsenals of doomsday weaponry and other potent technologies with which to blast their foes to ashes. Silphek's obsessions have also played their part, for his desire to be draped in the molten glory of his stars led his dynasty's cryptex to fashion him living skin of meta-gold that, through advanced hyperalchemical processes, allows him to transform into pure light and cross incredible distances in an eye blink. Believing himself a celestial deity, Silphek has since bestowed this golden form upon his most trusted overlords and other lieutenants, and has even had the technology worked into the burnished bodies of his lesser soldiery. Now, the grand legions of the Nephrekh Dynasty advance in gilded magnificence, stuttering and blinking across the battlefield with terrifying speed. The Nihilakh Dynasty. The Nihilakh Dynasty have garnered a fearsome reputation amongst the galaxy's younger races since their worlds began to awaken. Though often steady and defensive, they are nonetheless ruthless conquerors and deadly foes. As they began to rise from their great sleep, the Nihilakh discovered that much of their ancient territory had been invaded. Faced with the very real danger of being overrun, their surviving nobility consolidated the dynasty's strength upon their crown world of Gaiden. This proved a wise move indeed. The Nihilakh had always been a tremendously rich dynasty and had funneled much of their vast resource wealth into Gaiden's hyperspatial vaults. Now they drew upon their horde to fashion legion upon legion of war engines, raise mighty defenses, and equip their warriors with the finest weaponry imaginable. The lesser races hurled their armies against the newly fortified borders of the Nihilakh Dynasty and were rebuffed with devastating casualties. Moreover, once attacked, the arrogant and imperious Nihilakh nobles would not rest until the perceived impudence of the attackers had been punished with utter annihilation. The well-appointed Nihilakh legions had another advantage in this war for survival. Greatest of the dynasty's cosmic treasures was the preserved head of the Yith Seer, the last of its race, and a means by which the Necrons could peer into the skeins of the future. Armed with such prescient intelligence, the Nihilakh struck precisely where and when they needed to in order to crush any interlopers, transforming their defensive stance into a more offensive march of conquest. Now, the Nihilakh legions are on the march, seizing and heavily fortifying new territories with Noctilith pylons before advancing again. They have openly aligned themselves with the returned Silent King and seek nothing short of galactic dominance for their people. The Novokh Dynasty. Before biotransference, the Novokh Dynasty was infamous for its long and elaborate blood rituals, and for the naked savagery of its armies. Though unrecognizable as those hosts from prehistory, their legions retain this bloodlust. Few Necron legions are as frightening to face in battle as those of the Novokh Dynasty. It is one thing to witness flesh and blood warriors slashing a path through their foes, but to see glassy-eyed androids move from methodical, mechanical killing to ever more frenzied industrial slaughter is another scale of horror entirely. The Novokh offer no quarter, no mercy for their victims. Instead, they hack them apart like lunatic butchers set loose in a pen of livestock. They do not stop killing until their living metal bodies are drenched in gore and their victims are naught but dismembered meat. The reason for this gruesome spectacle is that the memories of their dynasty's blood rituals still linger in the personality engrams of the Novokh Necrons. Though they can be ponderous, almost somnolent before a battle's commencement, once their enemy's blood starts to flow, those engrams are triggered. They provide the Novokh soldiery with surges of vigor and aggression that prove near narcotic, while enlivening the blood-spattered Necrons to an ever more dangerous degree. Taking full advantage of this trait, the Novokh nobility field vast numbers of infantry assets headed by bands of blade-wielding Lichguard. These they augment, many would say recklessly, with those of their dynasty who have fallen to the destroyer curse. Such a force possesses numbers and resilience, yet its true might is revealed once its gestalt bloodlust awakens. The butchery begins. Employing these tactics, the Novokh Pharaon, Galmach the Moonkiller, has driven his legions relentlessly outwards from his crown world of Dal 6 in one gory conquest after another. They have crushed greenskins and humans alike and show no signs of slowing. Myriad Dynasties. The shifting void rifts of the Hiraki deeps hide the core worlds of the Sautekh Dynasty, which orbit the massive crown world of Megoshta in a stately dance across the eons. Smaller, heavily weaponized planetoids orbit them in turn, wreathed in sparking cerulean energy. The crystalline continent tombs of the Sautekh Dynasty feed upon the radioactive power of the void rifts that surround them. The sky overhead thick with rippling darkness and flickering blue comets. As their armies emerge from their stasis crypts and march to war, dull metal skulls reflect the cold sapphire stars far above. Though far from the largest or most prolific, the Sautekh Dynasty is arguably one of the most dangerous upon the field of battle due to its lethal and insidious weaponry. Harnessing the potent radiation in which its worlds bask, the Sautekh cryptechs have incorporated rad receptors into the weaponry of their soldiers. This advancement gives its legions an eerie aspect, causing a shimmering azure glow to radiate from them in waves. It is far more than an aesthetic modification, of course. The multispectral radiation that rolls off the metallic bodies of their soldiery is debilitating in the extreme to their foes. The icy lethality of the Hiraki deeps leave the foe weakened and in agony, easy prey for the merciless legions of the Sautekh. The Necrons Dynasty have always been synonymous with dubious and dishonorable conduct. Rarely did they adhere to the dynastic codes, for they sought always to employ the most expedient route to victory, even if that came by duplicity, misinformation, or assassination. So disenchanted did the Triarch become with the conduct of the Necrons that during the reign of Pharaon Oblis the Enslaver, they denied the dynasty aid when its crown world of Mobius came under ferocious orc attack. The devastation wrought by the greenskins was terrible, but not total. Though they lost much, the Necrons Dynasty survived as a jaded and hateful presence. They replaced their former magnificence with harsh, blackened copper carapaces and turned their backs upon the wider Necron race. They now employ any means necessary to protect their domains, no matter how ruthless or contemptible, and spit readily upon the so-called Great Dream of galactic Necron rule. The Sautekh Dynasty, in comparison, benefited greatly from their own rather deviant practices. An unusual pact, believed to have been forged shortly after biotransference, saw the nobility and cryptechs of this dynasty accorded equal status. Sautekh armies were occasionally even led by conclaves of cryptechs, and were always well served by efficient canoptic swarms and magnificent war engines. Over time, however, the cryptechs of the Sautekh Dynasty became arrogant, while their Pharaon, Anathrosis of the Black Star, became ever more paranoid that his upstart viziers would one day try to take power for themselves. As the Great Sleep approached, Anathrosis insisted upon veritable armies of canoptic constructs, slaved to his will alone, that could restore his legion swiftly to glory should they be compromised. He saw to it that his tomb complexes were built with triple-layered backup systems, each element built by rival cryptech conclaves, guaranteed not to collude, and again exclusively bound to Anathrosis' command. All this additional security proved to be of immense value during the Great Sleep. When the dynasties awoke, the vehicles, constructs, and warriors of the Sautekh emerged from their tombs all but intact. Though its leader remains paranoid and its cryptechs are still troublesome, the dynasty has conquered great swaths of territory ever since. So many fragmented or comparatively minor dynasties are there that even the returned Silent King does not know of them all. Some, though, are infamous amongst the Necrons, either for their methods or their turbulent histories. The Novokh Dynasty, for example, were ravaged by the coming of the Tyranid hive fleets, and now cling defiantly to the edges of the eastern fringe. Though they have lost much, this means that only their strongest and most determined nobles and legions have survived. Setting aside any notion of politicking, the elite armies of the Novokh now fight with cold fury to reclaim what they have lost. Needless to say, they have proven willing subjects for Szarekh since his return, for they know that ultimately he alone recognizes the dire threat that the Tyranids represent. The Oruskar dynasty, by comparison, possesses plentiful military power. They are cautious and defensive, however, for they guard a treasure of inestimable power and must be ever ready to defend it. Deep beneath the surface of their crown world, Thanatos, lies the celestial orrery, a perfect replica of the entire living galaxy wrought in precious metals, shimmering energy, and irreplaceable cosmic technology. As the galaxy changes, so the orrery shifts in real time to reflect this. and hundreds of Oruskar technoseers study its every nuance to inform the movements of their legions. More amazing and terrifying still is that with the greatest care and precision, the orrery can be used to affect the galaxy in turn, even fashioning black holes or snuffing out stars. Fortunately for the younger races, the Oruskar see themselves as celestial custodians, rarely employing their power unless in greatest need. Others are less cautious, however. The Oruskar's Pharaon, Hakmefet, currently lies besieged by the xenocidal legions of the Cardeneth Dynasty, who wish to unleash the full destructive potential of the orrery and remain obstinately blind to the ghastly consequences for reality itself should they succeed. The might of the skeletal Necrons is not limited to conventional dynastic legions alone. Bitter outsiders, resentful exiles, and malevolent aberrations abound in the wake of the Great Sleep, and many have fashioned Necron armies of their own. Thassar the Invincible, for example, has proven a perilous foe to all who stand before him. After his awakening, the self-styled and highly eccentric Pirate King seized the tomb world of Zepenik. Having manipulated the world's master program into making him Pharaon, Thassar remade Zepenik into the Reeve world, building a mighty fleet from drifting wrecks and beginning a campaign of terror against the lesser races. Then there are the haunted legions of Sarkhan, crown world of the Empire of the Severed. Long have the Necrons dreaded this awful region, for here catastrophic radiation storms created a dynasty's worth of isolated worlds. As though such a thing were not bad enough, however, now there are reports of Necron armies issuing from this region in great number. Ethereal after-images are said to dance about their bodies, and they move with such eerie synchronicity that they seem driven by a single godlike will. As yet, reports of these legions falling upon outlying fringe worlds, and by some supernatural process rendering them severed, remain unsubstantiated. If true, however, then the haunted legions represent a terrifying threat to what remains of the Necrons' collective souls. The threat of the Destroyer legions, meanwhile, is clear. None can say whether it is a natural degradation or some strange side effect of the Great Rift's opening, but the madness of the Destroyer cult spreads faster through Necron society than ever before. Nobles turn to nihilistic slaughter in alarming numbers, and in a few rare cases, the entire upper echelons of tomb worlds have dedicated themselves and their servile legions to this morbid cause. With the more unscrupulous cryptex helping to fashion new varieties of destroyer all the time, and ghoulish flayed ones flocking to the bloodshed they create. These legions of the lost and the insane carve bloody paths across the galaxy. The Necrons are a visual dichotomy. Their dynasties hold fast to eons-old martial traditions and highly regimented heraldic schemes. Yet time and entropy combine to render the grandeur of their legions faded and ghoulish. Moreover, the further inclusion of ghastly beings, such as the destroyer cults and flayed ones, corrupts the magnificence of the spectacle. Necron armies are thus both darkly majestic and menacingly horrific. The color schemes and heraldic glyphs displayed by the legions of the Necron dynasties are rooted in a time before biotransference. Once, the nobility of the flesh and blood Necron tier would have sent their soldiery to war bearing these markings upon their armor and fluttering banners. Some even had them scarified into their troops' skins. The legions were extensions of their master's power, very much possessions of those who ruled them, and it was only right and proper that the lords of the dynasties marked their chattel as such. When their soldiery were transformed into servile androids, the Necron nobility took to applying their dynastic colors and glyphs directly onto the warriors' metallic bodies. The Necrons' artificial forms are highly receptive to such decorations. Employing the arts of the cryptex, the hues of armor plates can be altered on a molecular level, and the frequencies of weapon crystals, arcane power sources, and the like can be attuned to glow with the same fierce dynastic colors. Equally, glyphs can be picked out in radioactive isotopes or crackling energy channels that would scorch away the flesh of living beings, but which blaze proudly upon the Necron soldiery amidst the smoke and shadow of battle. The glyphs themselves are the primary way in which the varying ranks within the dynastic legion are conveyed, and every dynasty has its own. This sigil conveys to the Necrons everything that dynasty stands for and embodies. It is displayed in various forms across all the war engines, warriors, and nobility of that dynasty, with only the ruling elite being permitted to bear the glyph in its entirety. With each step down the Necron's rigid hierarchy of society and sentience, the dynastic glyph is rendered more basic, or has sections omitted so that the lowly soldiery wear only enough of the glyph for it to be recognizable as their dynasty's own. There is another glyph that appears throughout the armies of the Necrons, regardless of dynasty or alignment. The Ankh of the Triarch is the Necron's omnipresent racial motif. To some nobles, it has long been a symbol of faded glory and a traditional affectation. To others, it is a mark of faith and fealty to the rulers of the lost Necron Empire. With the open return of Szarekh the Silent King, the formation of his new Triarch, it seems that the latter camp have been vindicated in their abiding, if somewhat hidebound, faith.